it's a strange paradox we find ourselves in, because on one hand, you've got, like, if you look at it objectively, you'll see that people are like, well, it's the best time ever to be alive. We've got, the most opportunity, we've got the best medicines, we've got the least people ever, starving, all of that stuff. But on the other hand, even though that quality of life is supposed to be increasing, you've got, depression, suicide, all of these things actually skyrocketing with it. And it's that is the cost of progress, because all of these amazing things that apparently we're doing, and these amazing medicines and treatments and things that we're developing, they've only need to be developed because of the problems that modern life has created. So it's a strange place that we find ourselves in, and that's why we need to really be careful about our approach to these things and our relationship with things like technology and that, because if we don't, technology is a great tool, but if it's using you, then you're the tool.
Hello and welcome to the Building Men podcast. Become the strongest version of yourself mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. What's up, brother?
What's up?
Like the pink?
You like the pink?
I do. So our logo changed and we have some pink in our logo now.
Yeah, so I'm all about the pink now. I'm promoting the pink.
It's funny, I did a thing on Instagram as far as what do people think. And most people were like, yeah, I get it. But some people are like, pink is for girls. Pink is feminine.
Yeah, well, that's sad.
What do you think about that?
That's a sad world. That it's feminine, that pink is feminine?
Yeah, what do you think about just the fact that people were pushing back with the pink in our logo?
I think that's sad. I think that they have a lot of inner work to do then. If that's their biggest thing, is that they're scared to do that, that's someone who really just hasn't, they don't know who the hell they are yet.
Exactly right.
They're trying to be someone that they're like, they have this idea of what a man is, and they're just sort of, consumed in that. And I'm not about that. I'm gonna wear pink everywhere.
You started the trend.
You have pants on, yeah.
You're wearing
a pink jumpsuit,
full length, full body pink spandex.
That's it.
That's what you're gonna wear next time. We'll have a Building Men logo on it. Maybe we could get sponsorship that way.
Yeah.
So speaking of our identification with masculinity, our guest today is a holistic health coach. His name is Stes Lane. I can't wait to talk to him about his name. We were like, how do you are we pronouncing this the right way? Yeah. Just an incredible dude. I started following along on Instagram. His page is Peak Primal Health, and his trademark or his tag is, and I'll bring him onto the Zoom meeting right now. He starts off, and I'm gonna butcher it, and then I'm gonna ask him to do it. So Steve comes on and he goes, "Mornin." So morning, Steve.
Just like that. Morning. How are we doing?
There it is.
Great. Thanks for being on the podcast, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm psyched to chat to you guys today.
Absolutely. So we just did it. That's kind of how we start off. We do a little bullshitting back and forth as brothers, and I'm going to start right off the bat with the start of the day. The whole morning. Yeah. You do a sunrise club. You post about the sunrise club. So tell us a little bit about that. What's that all about?
Yeah, so Sunrise Club has become something that I've done for, it's probably 3 years or so. I get up and I watch the sunrise every day, regardless of where I am. And obviously, most of the time I'm at home, and home is Florida for me now. And I'm like 4 blocks from the water. So that's a really nice way to start the day. I jump on my longboard, I skate down there. It takes me a couple of minutes. I get down there just in time for the sunrise. I watch the sunrise coming up. You've got, physiological and health benefits to that, the appropriate light at the right times to entrain the circadian clock and start, the body's natural rhythms kicking in. But, which is wonderful to have that. But also it's a really good time to just practice that. Oh my God, I'm still alive, and life is good, and a bit of gratitude. And I also think there's like a really nice symbolism to the sunrise, because it's the waking up of the day, right? It's the waking up of the world. And I think I'm big on saying one of the most important things I think you can try and do in this life is to wake up. and, wake up to who you are, what you're here to do, leaving behind a lot of that baggage and stuff like that. And that requires waking up. So it's multifaceted, but it's a really great way to start the day. It really helps with your health, really helps with good sleep, but it also symbolizes something much deeper to me, which is the most important thing you can do is wake up. So I like to get out there, start the day that way, and bring that momentum into the day every day.
And we're not guaranteed anything. We're not guaranteed that we're going to wake up tomorrow morning. So the fact that we get to watch another sunrise is a beautiful thing. And now you have people following along with you. So this has become a little bit of a movement on your page that people are now following along, and they're going through that. And you've noticed a little bit of a groundswell with that following. So it's been really cool to watch that whole process. So how did you get into this space of being a holistic coach? How did you take us along the journey with your journey, and how did you become interested in this area?
It was kind of, I was forced into it in a sense. Like my desperation became the motivation to get healthy, because I was not a healthy kid. I didn't come from a healthy family. I watched a lot of diseases of lifestyle afflict my family and take people way before the time. And my mom had a bad relationship with food and a bad relationship with her body and dieting. And you see that stuff playing out in the household, and you learn certain things, right? Certain things that might not be actually healthy to understand, like that your worth is defined on what how much weight you lost that week. And if you had a good week, it's great. And if you God forbid you didn't lose any weight, or you gained a pound or two, that was terrible, and it was bad news. And I was watching all of that, and kind of then looking at my own little chubby body and my insecurities, and picking up all kinds of baggage around that insecurity and body dysmorphia, and just like this really unhealthy relationship. And eventually it was just kind of, like I said, it was a desperation thing. It was like, I can't do this. There's got to be a better way. And that was just the catalyst to start trying to learn stuff myself, trying to consume podcasts and listen to books, and just run this never-ending self-experiment that I've been doing now for over a decade, that has now started to morph into like a system, and finding a lot of things that work, and having to go through a lot of things that didn't work. And that really I became obsessed with that. And what started out for me as just being health from purely the physical standpoint, because that's what it was for me. That's all I thought it was. It was just like being a healthy weight and being able to exercise and do what you wanted to. Then it just morphed much deeper into like, oh, that's just one facet of health. And that's where it truly became holistic. It was like, you can have rock solid abs if that's what you want, and you can lift 2 times your body weight, and you can do all of these crazy things. But if you're not right in your head, and you're not right in your heart, and you're not integrated as a person holistically, then it doesn't matter. That's only one facet of health. So it really then morphed in the last probably 4 or 5 years in particular into a deeper understanding of what health truly means. And true health is holistic. It's not just in one area. So that's kind of why I'm big on using that word holistic health these days, and really looking at a person and at myself and the approach in general in a truly holistic manner.
Your journey through school, you mentioned it was either on your Instagram page, it might have been a podcast you were interviewed on. You played rugby in school. Mm-hmm. And you talk about being on the pitch and the lessons that you learned, but then you did this very vulnerable dive into the way that you felt that you looked versus some of the other boys who were playing. And then you would get into the locker room, and you were like, man, this body doesn't look like their bodies. And I'll use it as a base for getting into a little bit of a dive around masculinity. You speak a lot around masculinity. When did you first learn? Was it your lessons around masculinity? Did you learn them from playing rugby in school? Was it after? When did you start defining your definition, or like honing in on your definition of masculinity?
Well, I guess I had an early kind of view of what that was, that has radically changed again in the last 5 years, probably, as I've deepened my own practice and spirituality and all of that stuff, of like truly understanding myself and truly understanding trying to understand the world a little bit better. Because I guess my view of masculinity coming up in those kind of environments was it was very like tough guy. It was very out of tune with understanding that, if we're to truly embrace our masculinity, then we also have to embrace its counterpart, which is our inner femininity as well, and find balance. And you don't find much of that in the rugby locker rooms. You don't find much of that then, because after rugby it was MMA, and it was a tough guy sport, and it was kill or be killed, and it was be tough posture, a lot of banter. And I still love a good amount of banter, and playful name calling and all of that stuff. But that's all it ever was. There was no ability and no willingness to kind of show any kind of vulnerability, because it really was seen as a weakness. And God forbid you showed your emotions or spoke about what was truly happening. Nobody really did it, so nobody gave permission for anybody else to do it. And that's where you get into these, just the not really healthy expressions of what is a pseudo masculinity, I think, which is just really a bunch of men that don't really understand that. They're closed off to that within themselves, and that's really difficult. So that changed a lot recently in really kind of doing the work on myself and being in a good relationship and all of that stuff. But for the longest time, I thought what masculinity was, and I thought what being a man was just basically being tough, working hard, getting shit done, not showing your emotions. When you feel a certain way, just stuff it down and get on with it. And I think a lot of men resonate with that. They feel that now, or they felt that for a long, long time. And, maybe that's not the healthiest way. Maybe denying our, humanness is not actually the path to, true health. So that's changing, which is a good thing, because I think that's a much healthier expression of our masculinity,
As a middle school principal, I was a middle school principal for more than a decade. I ran the program called Building Men. It started as a boys' social group, and what we were trying to do was figure out what masculinity means. What does it actually mean to us? And listening to what 12, 13, 14-year-old boys think about what a man is, it's hysterical. I mean, first of all, I would have them, I would say, what does a man look like? And, basically he was a big dude, bald head, leather vest, riding a motorcycle with tattoos all over his body. He could break, he'd break a bottle, and it was like they just had this vision of what a man was. And so as kids are growing up, the first thing that they identify with is how good of an athlete you are. So if you're a really, really good athlete growing up, if you're just physically more powerful, faster, bigger, stronger, you're seen in a higher regard, as you're looking at yourself versus your peers. Then when you get to high school, it's about how many notches are on your belt, how many girls can you bang, pretty much. And the boys who were lucky with the girls or were getting laid a lot, they had a higher status, as they were seen versus their peers. And then it becomes, once you're out of college and you're, or whatever, you're starting your career, it's about how much money you're making. Then it's accumulation of things. It's a status thing, like how big is your car, how big is your house, what does your wife look like, that kind of thing. Where I would say to the boys, it's not if you're basing masculinity on things that can be taken away from you, then where are you? So if it's about how good of an athlete you are, and you get a debilitating disease and you lose your leg, God forbid. Yeah. Then are you less of a man? Or are you going to base it on something that comes from inside? So with that as a backdrop, what do schools need to do then? I wonder, what should schools be doing to help boys understand what masculinity means?
That's a very good question. I think, ultimately, I feel like boys need to be shown. They need leaders. And I don't know that you can just tell somebody to embody that if they can't truly be it themselves. It's one thing to say, okay, we want to, tell these kids and show them what this is. But it's like, well, if you've ever had somebody try to tell you something and that they're a talking head, they're not a walking example of that. The words don't really have any resonance to them. They just kind of fall away. The kids are just gonna be like, who's this guy talking about? So it really needs to come from an embodied place of leadership. But you need to do what we need to do in culture. And I don't know, if school is necessarily the place for this, although I think it could be with kind of like a big reform and kind of structure, is like this idea of something that has been a part of human culture for, probably since time immemorial, which is these ritual initiations, these rites of passage. that kind of mark the transition from boyhood to manhood, that have been numerous different things in numerous different cultures. Everything from plant medicine rituals to sun dances, and to all other kinds of things. The wilderness retreats and survival in the wild and reconnecting to nature and understanding what those things mean. So there's many ways you can skin a cat, but these archetypal kind of journeys that encourage a boy essentially to step into manhood, but understanding what that means. Because again, if they have a limited view of what manhood means, it's just like, okay, grow up and be tough now, go
man up,
and they're just going to feel scared about that. So it's a tricky one, but I think we're crying out for it. We need it, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing is a desperate call for this, and we need it now more than ever.
I love what you just said. I'm all on board with that. We need to develop a program around rites of passage. It's so lacking right now with young men. There's not something like that that's going on. We need to incorporate something like that for boys understanding what manhood is. It's interesting, Steve, because my brother and I just talked about this recently. People develop their identities in that adolescent range. People develop their sense of self, their sense of where they fit in the world. They kind of put themselves into different categories or boxes between 12, 13, 14, 15 years old when they start to figure out who they are, find their voice. What I've noticed, and you probably noticed the same thing in your work, is that if you don't fully comprehend or come to a true sense of your identity for whatever reason, it could be trauma or whatever, a lot of men that I see or we see right now, they're in this extended state of adolescence, and they're still trying to figure out what their purpose is. So they do all this work. They get the job, they get the girl, they get the house and the car. They climb to the top of this mountain, and they're like, what the fuck am I? This is not where I need to be. And they go on this self-discovery journey now, like, I need to find my purpose. I need to find what it's about, because I feel like that they didn't do the work when they were in those adolescent years. And that's our fault. It's society's fault that we didn't have those experiences for especially young men going through that. The other cool thing that you said was, going through these ritualistic things, the archetypal things, to understand what masculinity means in that really like raw like sense. But then with the other side of it, you also talk a lot about being able to show your emotion and to show your vulnerability, the yin and the yang of the masculine and feminine roles. So talk to us a little bit about how that works into your definition of masculinity, how the masculine, feminine roles, the yin and the yang, play off each other.
Yeah. Yin and yang are like union analysis, kind of the anima, the animus, that each of us, as a man or as a woman or as whatever, you're going to have both. You're going to have a masculine and a feminine side. And typically speaking, men are going to have a proclivity towards more of that masculine energy, which is more in the realm of the yang. It's more of that penetrative energy, phallically speaking and literally speaking. It's about doing. It's about go, go, go. It's about grind. It's about hustle. And because we're not in our divine feminine, in the create, like the female have the superpower essentially of creating all of life. Like, what a wonderful thing. It's the mother earth, and they're mothers to earth, and they bring in and they steward life that way. So we create, we play a part in that divine creation, but otherwise, to fill that void, we mostly create with our hands. This is why men typically, they build businesses and they construct things physically with their hands. So we get sometimes too much in that yang energy, which is all about essentially expending resources. And if we don't nurture that feminine within us, which is more about the acquisition, bringing things into it, that's why the yin symbol is black. It draws things into it, which is why if you ever wear a black t-shirt outside, you notice it gets very, very hot, right? It acquires things, it draws into it. And it's also the realm of creation. It's also the realm of intuition. It's also the realm of softness. And a key word, I think, which is something we all need to work on if we are to truly be in our kind of Shiva-like energy, divine masculine energy, is vulnerability. And a lot of men avoid vulnerability because they've confused vulnerability for weakness. But the interesting thing about vulnerability is, as soon as you acknowledge your vulnerability and you own it, it's not a weakness, because it's no longer a vulnerability, it's a choice. It becomes a superpower. And in that vulnerability and having that superpower becomes your emotional availability to just express what's alive in you, to, God forbid, cry if you want to cry, and know that that doesn't mean that you're any less of a man or a person, that it's just, this is, the crying thing is funny in humans in general, but particularly in men. We're the only animal on the animal kingdom that cries, yet we treat it like some kind of moral shortcoming if, God forbid, we shed a tear. But it's like, maybe that is actually something that's truly alive in us that just needs to be moved through us right now, and denying that has a lot of consequences, whereas like letting that through is strength, is power, to show like, I'm emotional right now and that's okay too, because that is, to me, that is strength, and that is one of the fundamental pillars of that divine masculinity, is strength and is leadership and is vulnerability. So balancing that and finding how to live in both of those worlds, so you can lead and you can be a go-getter and you can get after it and you can crush it, and you can also soften and you can also listen. Yep. And you can also dive into the working in and the spiritual development and the emotional stuff. That's integrated masculinity, and that's really what we want. That's transitioning from boy psychology to man psychology. And I think that's where you mentioned it a few minutes ago. That's what it feels like we're stuck in right now. Archetypically, globally, it seems like we're stuck in this boy psychology, and it's time to get past that and get into this man psychology, and that means integrating.
Absolutely. You mentioned vulnerability is a superpower. I jotted that down. That's such, I'm going to pull, I need to pull that clip, because what an interesting way to think about that. You mentioned, like, historically, men were so afraid to show their emotions. So it was this, I think about our father's generation. They didn't show emotion. Our father barely showed emotion. The first time I saw Dad cry was 6 months ago.
I never even seen him. Yeah,
he's 69 years old. It's the first time that I saw him get, I don't even know if there was any moisture that actually left his face, but just the way that he got choked up, it's the first time I saw it. And I was like, I had such deep respect for that moment, and I can still remember the way that I felt in that specific moment, and I was like, wow, that was, to me, it was so powerful to see him express emotion. I have never seen it before. His after his parents had died and loved ones, and his brother-in-law, partner in business of 40 years had passed, never shed a tear. And that there was one moment that he was talking about his brother and his parents that he broke down. And I just remember, like, that was such a cool thing. So the vulnerability is a superpower to me. That made me see him in such a stronger way by seeing him be able to shed a tear and show emotion. That's such a powerful statement you made.
Yeah, and it's like courageous too. Like, there's courage within being vulnerable. And like, the other way I look at vulnerability, I feel like as men, we look at it as we avoid vulnerability and we wear all these masks all of our life. And the vulnerable side of us is like our most authentic self. It's like that inner being that's our true self, and we try and protect it because we don't want to. We feel like if we present that and we get abandoned because of it, and we show that, we're going to be ostracized from our tribe, from our community. And so that's a frightening thing. So we put on, at least from my own experience, this is what I've done for a lot of my life, and I just sort of came to the realization that I would put on these masks and put on what I thought people wanted me to be, and kept pushing down further and further and further my true self, to the point of that I didn't even know who my true self is. I couldn't even tell you who I was. I was whoever the hell I thought that you wanted me to be in that moment. And it's a really scary realization when you're like, I can't even describe who I am, because I'm just these bullshit identities that I put on myself.
Think about this too, State, the yin and the yang idea with masculinity and femininity. I've also seen it talked about as order and chaos. You know, the masculine energy is more the order field energy, and the feminine energy is chaos. I've heard women in particular get pissed off at that, saying, the idea of chaos. So talk to us a little bit about that. Like, you're thinking about, the masculine energy being more the order field energy, and the feminine energy being more the chaos or the chaotic energy. How would you, if a woman said to you, that's bullshit, how dare you say that our energy is chaos? How would you, come back at that? Or how would you, define the order and the chaos in relation to masculine and feminine energy?
Yeah, it's funny because words can often have like baggage, right? And I think that the problem is with the word. So I'd kind of reframe on like the chaos. Don't just, when people think chaos, they think like just disaster. They think like everything's all over the place. It looks like a bomb went off in here. There's no rhyme or reason. So when you say like, oh, order and chaos, and that's the feminine energy, they're like, well, that's very unfair, you know? So it's like, well, let's maybe reframe that a little bit and just think about, you know, it's the power of chaos is really the feminine energy, because it is incredibly powerful. The way I like to, you know, paint the picture for that feminine energy more in contrast to the masculine energy is it's like the ocean, and the ocean can sometimes be extremely still, but then it can be very chaotic. It can be that storm rolls in, and that is actually an enormous superpower, and it's not something that women should try to deny of themselves. It's the literal power, the innate divine power of the feminine that is, again, the creator of life. And what that, you know, because you it's very important. I do a lot of work with men, and a lot of, you know, work around health, and a lot of health actually ends up being around like healthy relationships and understanding these kind of the dance between the masculine and feminine in relationship, and how to nurture that, so you create this polarity, so you recreate this magnetism between man and wife, between you know, two people, so they're supporting each other and allowing each other to truly step into more of the natural roles, because when they do, they flourish, not only individually but collectively. They come back together, they create a beautiful, you know, harmonious relationship, and they can reignite passion and physical attraction too, because what the chaos, or that power, that emotional kind of divinity of the feminine sometimes needs in order to step into that and feel truly in the feminine, is the grounding nature of the order of the masculine. It's like that weight to the ground, that just there's two hands on the shoulder and a hug that says, you're safe, I've got you, I'll hold you, you are protected. And that provides an element of safety for the feminine to ease back into what it is. And when it's in that, it's radiant, it's confident, it's expressive, and it draws things to it, and the magnetism comes again. So, you know, there's a bunch of different words, like you said, the yin and yang, the order and the chaos, but ultimately understanding that these actually serve a purpose, because if you try to pretend that they don't exist, or you know, by having a masculine element in a relationship who's not fulfilling the role of the masculine, and now you're actually creating a deficit, and the female has to now step into her masculine. Now what you've done is you've depolarized the relationship. Now you're like two ends of the same magnet trying to attract, and it's never going to work, because they just repel and they repel. So it requires a willingness from each side to be what they are in order to create that magnetism again. And that ultimately comes down to accepting that there is a difference here. There's a difference between men and women, and that should not be something that we pretend is not real, because, you know, it's maybe not as politically correct these days. It's something that actually I think should be celebrated, because it's wonderful and it's beautiful, and it creates life. And what's greater than that? So I think, you know, just reframing that to understand that chaos might have some baggage of you know, the word baggage to it, but it's more so than anything else just to explain the power, you know, the real power of the feminine energy.
And to come up with that really succinct definition and understanding of masculine and feminine energy, you have to be a student of people. You have to have done a lot of work just observing. And I'll use that as a segue into something I found really interesting in following your page, is an interesting hobby that you have in people watching at the mall. And so you say you go to the mall and you watch people, and you're like, I like to watch people move. And I was like, all right, you got me hooked. I'm hooked into this. Whatever you're selling here, I'm buying. I want to hear more about that. So use that as an opportunity to talk about movement in general. So I'll segue off the masculine, feminine into that message that you had just around movement and bare feet movement. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so like watching the way people move will tell you a lot about the choices that they make in life, or potentially some, you know, you can watch the way somebody moves and be, you know, I have a background in like biomechanics and sports, you know, therapy and all of that stuff. So it's kind of like, oh, that person's dealing with this. And it first starts as, you know, like a very kind of, oh, that person could be helped by this, and just watching. But also you kind of see how somebody moves, you know, the way they move through space, the way they either hump their shoulders and shrink themselves, or the way they can stand tall and, you know, be proud and confident, the way that they're connected to the ground, the way that they, you know, have either removed themselves from nature by putting themselves in big padded shoes and exercising on machines, or not exercising at all and spending most of the time sitting down in couches, or somebody that you can see they just move effortlessly and confidently, and those people are probably much more in kind of natural relationship with the way that we are designed to move, which can be distilled down into functional movement patterns of pushing, pulling, bending, lunging, twisting, and gait, walking, jogging, and sprinting. And this is a facet of kind of holistic health again, right? So you've got all of this inner world stuff of balancing the spirit and tapping into masculinity and balancing that, but you've also got many other facets of health. How are you going to eat? How are you moving? Is your skeleton integrated? Are you confident in that? Can you get up and down off the ground? Can you move quickly? So just watching that is always fun for me, because I always just am constantly gathering information and seeing what people are doing, and maybe the consequences of what is happening as we seem to continually drift further and further away from nature. And we've swapped squatting for seats, and we've swapped our barefoot running for big old cloud cushiony trainers and all of that stuff. And it's another testament to the further we get from nature, the more consequences we seem to pay. And if we get back to basics as much as possible, well, the basics are going to work, because that's much more in line with the way we were designed to move and think and operate. And my whole approach, in a sense, is a lot of getting back to basics, and that's just one aspect of it.
You also talk about, are you going to?
Oh, I was going to say that it's not by accident that as our technology grows exponentially, so does our mental health, and it as on the decline. It's not by accident that we have so many people who are on medications, who are resorting to Western medicine in order to mitigate all of these ailments that are, because we've distanced ourselves from nature so greatly, and we've relied so heavily on other ways and workarounds to get through this. So I was just, that kind of made sense to me as you're watching people and doing this. It's like you can kind of have an idea of how they sort of disconnect, and then they're more reliant on other ways to get through. So
it's also, people have become so comfortable. I mean, technology is a great thing in moderation, and both of our businesses, respectively, we use social media to further perpetuate our messages. So it's needed, but at the same time, it's made us so comfortable that it's killing us. The obesity rate, diabetes, it's really unbelievable what the comfort has done, and we're big proponents in making sure that you're putting yourself in intentionally uncomfortable situations every single day. And and it's so important to that mind over matter, understanding that it's important to choose the uncomfortable situation rather than the easy sitting on the couch watching Netflix.
Yes, I think something you're both alluding to there with the kind of the cost of progress and the cost of becoming more kind of intertwined with technology. That a question a lot of people get think about a lot is what's the future of AI, and what's going to happen? Are we going to have robots and shit one day? I think to a degree we're humans, especially humans that are kids becoming adults, they're almost the first extension of AI. They were born with screens attached to the end of their bodies, from being bloody 1-year-old babies, and they don't really know who they are without this device. And it kind of is creating this epidemic almost of digital dementia. We've outsourced so much of our thinking and our capacity to problem solve to devices because they do it better, but we pay the price for that. And all of the stuff that's happening with the skyrocketing illness rates and obesity rates, and it's a strange paradox we find ourselves in, because on one hand you've got if you look at it objectively, you'll see that people are well, it's the best time ever to be alive. We've got the most opportunity, we've got the best medicines, we've got the least people ever starving, all of that stuff. But on the other hand, even though that quality of life is supposed to be increasing, you've got depression, suicide, all of these things actually skyrocketing with it. And it's that is the cost of progress, because all of these amazing things that apparently we're doing, and these amazing medicines and treatments and things that we're developing, they've only need to be developed because of the problems that modern life has created. So it's a strange place that we find ourselves in. And that's why we need to really be careful about our approach to these things and our relationship with things like technology and that, because if we don't, technology is a great tool, but if it's using you, then you're the tool,
And suicide rates, it's not prevalent in third world countries. It's not prevalent in the underdeveloped countries. Suicide rates they're the worst in the countries like America, countries like England, and people that have those opportunities in front of them. But what it does is it perpetuates this depressive state, because it's one like the fear of missing out. It's the constant striving to to get the latest and the greatest. And even think about phones with kids right now. You had mentioned when kids are a year old, it becomes an extension of themselves, so much so that even if a phone is not next to them, it's a part of their body in a way. I talk a lot about nonverbal communication, and think about your personal space bubble. And people, typically it's like 3 feet around you. There's a lot of factors that determine where you let someone inside of your personal space. It's gender, it's perceived health problems, it's former relationships with that person, a million different things. But a phone has become their personal space, to where if the phone is on the other side of the room and I pick up a teenager's phone, I have just gone into their personal space, and it will elevate their heart rate. They'll have physiological responses to me grabbing their phone. It's a mind fuck when you think about it. It really, I feel bad for this generation of kids growing up. That's all they know.
It's
it really is all they know.
It's sad to me that that's the case, and you see it happening all over the place. And it's funny, like you were talking about with, I was talking to our father about this the other day, and I was saying how, I was just saying how as time goes on, even though our life expectancy has grown, right, we're living well further than we've ever been living before. I was like, the quality of our life has declined to a sense. So like you were saying, like before this, we didn't live as long, but we also didn't have these self-afflicting diseases that are going on that we're doing to ourselves, and therefore we're having medicine help us live longer, but our quality of life is going down because we're being hooked up to a machine and taking a pill every single day, and we're not able to do all of these things that our ancestors couldn't do or were doing before. We can't do that, and we're just being kind of pulled along by this stuff. And so it's like, yes, we're living longer, but also to what cost are we living longer?
Right.
Like, are we really learning, or we're just relying the whole time on something else? So it's like, I don't need to change my habits. I'll just wait for someone to give me something to get me through this issue that I have. It's just like that victim mentality that people have.
The other thing,
life has become very artificial. Like how many people in your real life, like how many people do you know? Like you could call them up, you could touch them, you could give them a hug. You actually know these people that like have ripped 6-pack abs and live their life on yachts in the Bahamas and drive Lamborghinis and fly private jets. Like most people are going to say zero, but you open up your phone and your feed is just filled with these people, living these amazing dream lives, and then you're left going, well, I'm very average, and that it kind of sets you up for this absolute awful comparison syndrome, because you're looking at everybody else's curated, filtered, highlight real lives and feeling inadequate about yours. That can't possibly be healthy over the long run. So there's a cost to this artificial life that we're living, and you're spot on with the the lifespan versus health span, thing, right? Lifespan is increasing, but health span is not increasing, because most people after, the age of 60 years old, the average, 60 plus year old is on at least 2 prescription medications and is just on this slow decline into chronic pain and these problems. And, we also have this very strange relationship with death, that we want to pretend that it's like not happening, and we try and hide it, and we try and we'll string people end of life care out, like people that are barely functioning anymore and they're in pain, and we'll spend tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars keeping people alive for an extra 5 years, but the quality of life is next to nothing just because we're so terrified of death, which doesn't make sense to me, because it's the one thing we have in common. We're all going there. That's the way we all graduate. So there's so much, I think, that we have lost by virtue of living in this strange, artificial, modern life version of life, that we've lost this respect and reverence for what is real, what is truly important, to celebrate the grand finale and the ultimate transition in death, and understanding that if we hold that, that life is really the challenge, to prepare for that. And I think, if we forget those things, we're going to pay the price. We can't not. So it's just a very interesting time. It's a wonderful time to be alive, no doubt about it, but it's also presenting unique challenges that we've never faced before, because we're the furthest away from nature that we've ever been.
Think about the journey that we've gone on, Steve. Just from the very first thing we talked about was MORNIN, and the Sunrise Club, all the way through life to talking about death. Thinking about that journey we've been on. It's so interesting.
Journey of life, right there.
Really, that journey we've been on. And so the things that you talk about with extending life, obviously science is a big part of that. Science is, the research that we've done, and obviously science is really important. One thing you talk about, though, is science is limiting. That idea of science, and people just say, well, what does the science say? It's like science is sitting next to me on the couch saying fucking, this is like what it is.
Capital S science.
Yes. So talk to us a little bit about that. What is it when you think about that? Science is limiting. You did a whole thing. It was in the red light. It was like your red light thing on Instagram. Talk to us about your thoughts on science being limiting.
Yeah, so I think we're living in the realm now of scientific materialism, which essentially says that nothing is real that cannot be, weighed and measured, right? And science is king. And in a sense, scientism has become, it's almost like a new religion for many people, as the rise of like kind of atheism or nihilism comes in, and you've got this. And I think that's actually a product of probably what we were just speaking about. You get disconnected from nature, and you lose the divinity, and you lose the mystery, and you're kind of like, what's the point? And then the next thing is, well, it's just science, right? Science is the only thing. And I've come across this, talking about a lot of these concepts. You talk about something like masculinity and femininity, for example, with a scientific materialist or somebody that's more inclined with that way of thinking. They're going to listen to that and they're going to go, well, that's bullshit, because you can't prove that. That's just a theory. And you're like, yes, it is just a theory, okay, but on that line of thinking, do you believe in love? And they're going to say, of course I believe in love. Do you I love my wife, I love my dog, I love blah blah. Okay, well, great. Can you weigh and measure that? Like, what does that look like in a lab? And then they're like, no, you cannot weigh and measure love. So we can already get these scientific materialists that think that only if something can be like held in your hands, weighed and measured, kind of scientifically validated with a hypothesis, is it real? You can catch them in a bind right there, because there are certain things that we cannot explain with numbers and tests and petri dishes. There's, so it can be limiting. And if we limit ourselves to that view, then, that we're limiting ourselves to what is potential. And there's a lot that we don't understand, and there's a lot that science can help us with, but it cannot be the only thing that we validate hypotheses on. It cannot be the only thing that we allow to determine what is right and what is wrong, because there is a whole world outside of science. And the one thing that science is never settled. It's ever evolving, and it should always be questioned and open to the realm of possibilities. And you'll see that from some of the greatest scientific minds of our time. In particular, Albert Einstein, towards the end of his life, said that, the only thing that, exploring science has taught him is that it's made him become even more of a mystic. Every single year of his life, he was just like, the more science I do, the more I just believe in the great mystery of something that cannot be explained with numbers or theories. And that's really the limiting aspect of science, is that ultimately this is a whole bloody great mystery, and it's a wonderful mystery, and science is never going to be able to justify that, and we need to be okay with that.
And not only that, you think about science creates all of these different medicines, and as they're brought to market, take Luquestra, and it'll it cures this and this, but don't take it if you have this or this. and then all of a sudden there's side effects that you grow a fucking horn out of your ass. You know what?
Right.
And then they have to recall it because, and then so the science at the time was perfect. It was exactly correct, and then they have to recall it. So you can't be, there has to be that mystery involved as well. So it's almost like the masculine feminine as well. Like there needs to be that order. So we need to use it as a base, but it can't be everything. You know, you can't. How do you measure a soul? How do you measure love? Like you mentioned.
Even Albert Einstein, his E equals MC squared. Every energy is matter squared. You know, it's literally that in itself. Like people can't explain. We're all energy, and people want to look at it like you were saying, like it is a religion, and it's like, you know, that the idea of science is questioning science. Like science is meant to be questioned and built on, and have meta-analysis off of this because new research keeps coming out. And again, there's also a difference between science and experiences. Like there's just no way scientifically to describe the feeling you get when you see the sunrise, right? It's like, to me, that's one of those things that it's like, this is something that I can't explain to you. You just need to be there for it to happen.
Right.
There's no quantifiable measurement that comes out of this that makes it what it is. What is beauty? What is that? How do you describe that? You know, it just, those things are what makes me, it's like, it goes against when people just assume, trust the science, and this is what it is. Yes,
absolutely.
The last thing that I wanted to talk to you about was the Stormtrooper on your chest. you got to tell. I'm watching a couple videos. I'm like, is that a fucking Stormtrooper?
Dennis was jacked up when he saw
I was
that.
like, I cannot wait to talk to Steve about the Stormtrooper on his chest. Tell us about that. I'm dying to know.
Absolutely. So I basically remember, you know, from growing up, I had a good, close relationship with my grandfather. And one of the coolest things I ever remembered from early on, and my dad used to tell me that, so it was his dad, so my dad's dad had like owls. He had like a couple of owls as a pet. And I was like, you can have owls as pets? Like, wow. This is so gangster. So that always stuck with me. I'm like, what a badass. I could just like, I had this image. I don't believe I ever saw it, but it was an image I created in my mind of him sitting in his chair. He used to sit in the same chair all the time, watching the TV. He was a man of his ways, you know, sitting in his TV, having a cigarette, and I could just picture him with this owl on. But he was really good to us. He picked us up from school when we was in elementary school, and we would come home and like coloring books, and would put Star Wars on a lot. And you know, when he passed away, and I wanted to kind of like have this homage to him, it was like, what about an owl with a stormtrooper's head? Because I was always just drawn to the stormtrooper, and there you go. It's kind of it's a homage to my late grandfather, and that was like an interesting way to, you know, depict some memories and remind me of that.
There's probably a deep dive into the whole psychology behind stormtroopers. I mean, you think about all the characters in Star Wars, and they're this mob of faceless individuals. They're all kind of the same. They kind of march in unison. I didn't even think about it, but there's probably like a deep psychological dive into Stormtroopers.
That's another podcast. Yeah, let's just I like seeing your wheels turning.
Oh man, I'm gonna do a solo just on Stormtroopers.
Like Han Solo.
There we go.
Oh, it's unbelievable. So, Steve, tell us how we can find you, how the Building Men audience can get in touch with you and follow along on your journey.
Certainly, the place I'm most active by far is Instagram, and that page is Peak Primal Health. And if you jump on my profile there, you'll see like story highlights, all the posts, and that you'll see, you know, daily, you know, Sunrise Club. You know, I'll be on there most days trying to share something, you know, whether it's a rant about something, whether it's a deep dive, whether it's going on lives. I'm always doing Q&As in my story, so I'll post the Ask Me Anythings and just kind of tackle those. In the link in that bio, you can find a couple of other resources. So there is, you know, there's a mailing list there. I do a Sundays with Steve email where I kind of just, you know, voice my thoughts on a different platform. I have a slightly different conversation with people on the email. And also there's, you know, for the men who are the target audience here, I did something probably about 6 months ago now called the Own Your Life Workshop. And now it's posted for free on YouTube. That's about an hour talking about some of the concepts that have really helped me and some of the concepts that I use in one-on-one coaching setting with men to just kind of bring out more of that, you know, divine masculinity and some of the kind of codes of conduct that one might implement to try and help that. So that's really cool resource as well for this crowd. I think they'd really enjoy that. So just jump on. And what if I'm ever on a podcast or whatever, what I love to say is, please, engage. You like jump on in the DMs, say like, this is where you heard me on the Building Men podcast. You know, what was a good takeaway? And, you know, just, I love to connect with people. And, you know, I'm still actually a real person behind the social media profile, not a robot and all of that stuff. So please say hello and let's chat.
Awesome. We'll put all of that information in the show notes for Building Men. If you like this episode, rate it, review what we're doing here. That's how it helps us get our message out around Building Men. You can find us building.men on Instagram. Buildingmencoach at Gmail is our buildingmencoach@gmail.com is our email address. Anthony, you got anything? Any closure?
No, thank you, Steve. This has been awesome, dude. I really appreciate all this time we've had. So.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I learned a lot. It was a cool conversation. I learned a lot. I would love to have you back on in a couple months just to connect with you again. Yeah.
Unpack the Stormtrooper.
Then I'll have more of a I'll have a more defined take on.
Dennis is gonna have a Stormtrooper tattooed on his neck by the time we get back.
Oh my God! So even just the journey of the Clone Wars. There's so many things going on there that just the Stormtrooper's journey we can do. I know.
I love you.
It's time. It's time.
Close around.
Steve Lane, thank you so much, brother. We appreciate you being here. We will see you next time on Building Men.